Next story is about George Floyd. And of course, the officer who murdered him, his name is Derek Chauvin. He is coming up for trial. Now, I was a little bit skeptical that this trial was going to take place so soon. I actually am still a little bit skeptical, but I am thinking that they're really trying to do their best to accelerate the trial to make sure that this happens because of the outstanding issues. You know, there's a lot of people out there who are still up in arms about it, rightfully so, saying that there needs to be accountability, and justice delayed is justice denied. This guy had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I think the official total was, and he's dead. And so if he's sitting in custody without being adjudicated, without being sentenced, that is leaving some open concerns from, of course, George's family and the people who are in sort of behind the movement on criminal justice reform. And so it's a little bit surprising to me that the trial is still scheduled for March 8th, which is in about 3 weeks. I thought for sure they would do their best to try to extend this out as far as they can, just because it's a complicated case, right? There were 4 officers involved, a number of witnesses. George Floyd has had, I think, 2 autopsies at this point in time. And there's some pretty hard science that's going to come into this about what was ultimately in his blood and in his system, and what the ultimate cause of death was, whether it was an overdose from fentanyl or whether this was something that was caused by the knee on the neck. And it wasn't just Chauvin's knee. There were 3 other officers who were also laying on him on the side of the road. So, there's a lot of causation, a lot of expert witnesses, expert testimony, complicated trial. This is a national trial, a lot of people involved, a lot of different lawyers. And typically these types of homicide cases will take years, sometimes 2 years. We covered another story. The shooter, we just talked about this last week. The shooter in Parkland, that happened in 2018. He shot, I think, 17 people, killed 17 people. That case is still not going to trial. That was from 2018. It's been 3 years. And so George Floyd, this just happened back in the middle of 2020, and now he's scheduled for trial already. So that is a very quick trial in my experience. We're seeing this elsewhere around the country. These trials just don't go that fast. But out of this jurisdiction in Minneapolis, they are moving full steam ahead. And since the trial is gearing up about 3 weeks from now, they are really having to think about security. They don't want anything that happened on Capitol Hill. They don't want any more riots. And so this story came over from CBS local affiliate in Minnesota. It says that city leaders in Minneapolis announced on Wednesday the outlines of a public safety plan for the upcoming trial of Derek Chauvin, the former city police officer accused of killing George Floyd. In a statement, the city says that the crews have already begun installing security perimeters around the Hennepin County Government Center, City Hall, and other nearby buildings. Additionally, the Minnesota National Guard has been activated to provide assistance for the duration of the Chauvin trial, which will begin jury selection during the week of March 8th. At a morning press conference, Mayor Jacob Frey said that law enforcement presence will be increasing throughout the trial. At the time the verdict is read, up to 2,000 National Guard members could be on duty alongside 1,100 law enforcement officers from 11 different jurisdictions. So that's a big presence, right? I mean, I think we had, 25,000 over National Guard over in D.C., so this is sort of an order of magnitude smaller than that, but it's a smaller jurisdiction, and they are loading up. They've got 1,100 law enforcement officials coming from 11 different jurisdictions. So 100 different officers from each different jurisdiction all pouring in, and they're going to be gearing up for this thing. And we don't have an idea on what the trial is looking like in terms of length, but it could be a month, right? This could be a very long trial depending on the type of pace that the judge sets. I want to go through and give you a quick update on it. It's looking like right here, the trial is still scheduled. So I took this screenshot earlier today, and the trial in this case is scheduled for Monday, March 8th, 2021 at the Hennepin County Government Center. An update for the media. Instructions for the media, you can reserve a seat. It's going to be posted here. General public, instructions for the members of the public who are interested in attending the trial will be posted here when they are determined. And so you can see these related cases. These are the other 3 officers who have also been charged, and it's moving forward. It's still on the schedule. I mean, they're telling the media, reserve your seats. Telling the general public, we're going to tell you how to get in here when the time is ready. And so it looks like beginning on March 1st, 6th Street in Minneapolis will be closed between 3rd and 4th. I've been to Minneapolis. Yeah, I went to Minneapolis like when I was in college, I think. And it was one of the most difficult cities that I've ever been to navigate. It's like very confusing. And this was before, Google Maps and Apple Maps and all that stuff. But it was a complicated city to navigate around. And I'm not bad with a map. But, Minneapolis, 6th Street, I don't know what that is, but they're locking it all down. They're closing it down. There will be a unified command center similar to the one that was in charge of security during the Super Bowl. When it comes to public safety and when it comes to the need for assistance, Minnesota comes together, said the police chief. Frey says the site of Floyd's death at 38th in Chicago will also be closed to traffic, but is expected to be the site of the protest. They will want to express their First Amendment rights, and we want to enable them to do so safely. He dismissed the political battles at the Capitol over paying for security, saying that traditional mutual aid arrangements will play out. Politics really has no place here. He mentioned there will be a significant road and skyway closures during the trial. There will even be a rapid response team to address rumors online and in person. The city says that it is developing guidance for business and property owners on how to take precautions while remaining open for business during the trial. Likewise, the city's Office of Violence Prevention will be working with neighborhoods and other groups to be prepared. John Harrington, commissioner of the DPS, the Department of Public Safety, says they are committed to protecting the rights of citizens. You're going to see uniforms of all different colors. You're going to see squad cars from all different kinds of places coming together here to say with one voice that we support the First Amendment. We are going to protect the Twin Cities, which is great, right? I mean, people have a right to go out and protest. In Arizona, we were arresting protesters for some stupid reason. A lot of those charges got dismissed later after defense attorneys and the media got involved, but it sounds like here they're making a very strong effort to ensure that people can go out and voice their opinions, which is a good thing. Now, the next question will be, well, what will happen? If it starts to get a little unruly, are they going to round up people? Are they going to start, pepper spraying people, shooting people with, rubber bullets and all of that stuff? Probably. We'll see. Hopefully not, but probably. Leaders, including the Hennepin County Sheriff David Hutchinson, emphasize that there's a line and crossing it will have consequences. If you cause harm, if you break things, burn things, hurt people's livelihood, I'm here to say you will go to jail. Harrington says about 300 officers from around the state have volunteered so far to help with trial security. He hopes more will step up in the coming weeks. State and local authorities are saying privately they are expecting criticism that their security preparations are excessive. They say they can handle that. They are still dealing with the aftermath of what happened last year and the ongoing criticism that they were not prepared and their response was not strong enough. And this was the same situation in Minneapolis, right? That's where we talked about them. They wanted to originally defund the police. The city council removed $8 million from their budget, and then they gave them $6.4 million back with really little modifications to the performance, to the execution of the duties that the police perform. I think basically the only real concession that they got from the police was that we're going to ask some more questions during our hiring procedures. Basically, we're going to add a checkbox into your application. You can check the box if you are a maniac, and then we won't hire you. So that's good. So they got the $6.4 million back, and they're going to be beefing up security, which is a good thing, right? We do not want no violence, no destruction, no burnings of buildings down. It's bad on Capitol Hill. It's bad during the summer of unrest. I guess the question will be, is Kamala Harris going to help bail out anybody who gets arrested like she did last time? All right, so this was from the court documents. These were submitted today, filed in the district court, the state of Minnesota, 218, as you can see, filed this morning, 10:49 a.m. 4th Judicial District. We've got State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. And so I was telling you a little bit about supplemental prosecution disclosure. Okay, disclosure is the government's files, right? They've got evidence. They're the ones who have the evidence. They know what they're going to be presenting. And so when you're in a criminal case and you're an accused, you're a defendant, you want to know what the allegations against you are. You have a right to cross-examine the evidence. You have a right to confront your accusers. You have a right to understand the nature of the offense and the nature of the allegations that are being promulgated against you. And so what we're talking about here is the government is giving the defense more information and they're notifying them of that. So let's take a look at what they're sending over to the defense right now. It says here, pursuant to Rule 901, these are local rules of criminal procedure, supplemental disclosure containing pages 43010 to 44045. Okay, so about 1,000 pages of stuff is being sent over there. And now, of course, I'm not working on this case, but if there are 44,000 pages of documents, that's a lot of documents, which is why I'm saying this is kind of a surprise that this case is scheduled for trial in 3 weeks, and it looks like they're setting it up to literally go, to actually happen. So what are they disclosing? We have more police investigative reports, so this might be, another 1,000 pages, including more police reports. We've also got some evidence receipts, so stuff that they've confiscated or they have it in evidence. We've also got some photographs and some videotapes and or DVDs. We don't know. And then we also have, it looks like, some other documents. So we've got turning point records. We have additional items provided for medical expert review. We have NMS laboratory litigation packet, BCA lab notes. We've got a crime scene processing final checklist. We have an evidence log, laboratory analysis request. We have evidence of chain of custody reports and a memo to the file regarding the Dr. Carter meeting. So it sounds like this is a lot of the forensic evidence about sort of the lab results. You know, what was in George Floyd's blood? What was the ultimate cause of death? We've got evidence of a chain of custody, or a chain of custody report about the evidence. So a chain of custody document is just sort of confirming that somebody did something and gave it to somebody else, and it's documenting that transition. So the way I explain it typically here is if you've got, let's say, a blood results or a vial of blood, you have Officer A who draws the vial, gives it to Officer B to take that vial and impound it into evidence. Officer B does that. It goes into evidence. So now you have a record. You've got a chain of custody. It went from A to B into evidence. Then when Officer C, or the lab technician, withdraws the vial from evidence, you go from the evidence locker to Officer C, who gives it to the lab technician, Officer D, and you just have a record of that. Because what you want to identify is where there are gaps in that chain. Right? If suddenly something happens and Officer B is fired, resigns, is killed tragically, just doesn't want to testify, something can happen. Well, now you have a blood vial that has been tested, but you don't have a chain there because B is missing. It went from A to C. Well, B could have damaged the evidence, could have jeopardized it, could have tainted the blood in one way or another. And because you can't testify, you can't find that person to bring them in to testify. That really undermines the state's case. So they have all of this stuff is now being disclosed over to the defense team. You can see the state attorney general is the person who is promulgating these disclosure, is signed off by Matthew Frank, who is the assistant attorney general for Minnesota. And so those are the documents that were just published today. So presumably the defense is going to review that, and then we'll see where it goes. All right, so let's go over to the locals.com questions that we're taking here. We've got Jeremy Matrita says, whether he is guilty or not, seems like it will be difficult to get a fair trial due to the riots and overall publicity this case has had. Yeah, and you know, this is a really tricky case for the prosecutors here, because if they don't get a intentional, are they charging him with intentional murder? I'm gonna have to refresh myself on the charges. Of course, we're gonna cover the hell out of this case. We're gonna dive into it deeply because I think it's gonna be very instructive. We're gonna be able to learn a lot from what is happening in the trial. I'm not sure what the publication rules are, whether they're gonna be live streaming any of this or whether we're gonna sort of be deciphering it after the conclusions of the day. But yes, you know, if it's not sort of a clean sweep, if he's not convicted on all counts, you know, I'm not sure what you're going to get in terms of a response from the public. You know, if they split this down the middle and say, no, it wasn't intentional murder, intentional homicide. It was instead, you know, negligent manslaughter. You know, he's still going to prison, but it's not the original murder charge or something resembling a murder charge. I don't think they charged him with intentional murder. I think it was sort of a second degree-ish murder charge, if I can recall correctly. But the point is, right, unless it's a clean sweep, I'm not sure, even if it is a clean sweep, I'm not sure that you're going to have people that are happy with this any way it goes. And so that's why they're prepping for it. I don't think you can read anything into the preparation. You know, my initial thought was, wow, they're really concerned here. Maybe they know that their case is weak. Maybe the prosecutors know, like, you know, the evidence here is not so good. We were going to make this fentanyl, or we were going to say that he murdered him, but this fentanyl report came back. It's looking like he was like at 10 times the limit. And, you know, maybe they know something that we just don't know. Of course, they know a lot that we don't know, but you could try to read into the beefing up of security and say, well, maybe they're trying to telegraph something. You know, this is in fact a weak case, and they're just prepping for a not guilty verdict. And that's why we see such a huge show of force coming in. Jack Elias says, do we really think that at this point, as much as the George Floyd case has been politicized, that any resulting adjudication will lower the public temperature? No, actually, Jack Elias. And you were one step ahead of me. I literally just said that. I'm not sure that anything is going to satisfy people. You know, he could be guilty on all counts. And when we were originally covering this, I think people were already upset that he wasn't charged with intentional murder. And I don't think that charge was justified, actually. You know, did he wake up intending to go and kill George Floyd or kill a man? I don't I didn't see that in evidence. But once he was sort of in the middle of the altercation with him, yeah, at that point, I would say he got intent to violate the protocols. And that is sort of, we read through the Minnesota statutes, and I can't recall them off the top of my head. It's been a long time. It's been, coming up on a year. But there was some distinction between the two, that it was still sort of a reckless, intentional murder, but it wasn't the same as, waking up and saying, well, my cheating wife has been cheating on me for 3 years, so I'm going to go track her down at work and kill her, right? That was sort of the high level murder charge. And I just didn't see that, right? Obviously, Derek Chauvin didn't wake up and go and try to kill George Floyd. Now, there was some sort of a contradictory evidence there saying that maybe that Chauvin actually knew George Floyd from prior altercations, prior incidents, and maybe they could make that higher level murder charge stick. And so, you could see here a situation where there's a clean sweep, he's convicted on all accounts, and people are still saying, well, the DA's office didn't charge him with the appropriate murder charge, therefore we're angry, we're going to burn the city down. That could be possible. We got Ma Fox in the house, says, yes, they murdered him. I know the YouTube chat isn't going to like that one, Robert, but it's the truth. The idea that assisting in killing another individual doesn't mean you aided in their death is ridiculous. Sorry, folks. Police have a duty to make sure those in their custody have access to immediate medical treatment when necessary. To not provide prompt medical assessment and treatment is negligence per se, in my opinion. And so, I think that's largely my same opinion on this. The police they have protocols, they've got proper procedures, and they were outside of that, right? A knee on the neck for 9 minutes when people are literally shouting at you, hey, you're killing him, he's not moving anymore, what are you doing? Is so grotesque behavior that you can't endorse that, right? And I know, I know that on this issue, I'm sort of out of alignment with a lot of the audience of this channel. Many of you, right? Many of you are in favor of, supporting the police, and the police do no wrong, and everything is excusable to a certain degree. And I shouldn't be generalizing that, but I know that there is that opinion out there. And I agree. I try to give the police the benefit of the doubt when they deserve it. But in a situation like this, I just don't think he deserves it. And it was something where there was a documented history of him sort of breaking protocol. And what we saw on that tape, it was so gruesome, and it was so inhumane to watch him just sort of ignore what was going on literally right under his knee, that I just can't imagine that a jury doesn't convict him of something. But we'll see where that goes. I do think that it's probably not going to resolve much of anything in this country. I think regardless of what the outcome is, it's still, the temperature in the room is still going to be high. I'm just hopeful that it doesn't lead to more damage, more destruction, more death, more violence. I don't like the idea that it's becoming more adversarial with the police. And I know I have a role to play in that, right? I come on this show and I am pretty hard on the police a lot, but it's part of what we do. I'm a defense attorney, and I think that that's necessary to balance the scales of justice. We have enough people out there puffing up the police every which way. They're heroes and they save us, and nobody knows what they go through every day. Every day is a death sentence potentially for them, and I get all of that. But they need to be held accountable. But burning cities down and defunding the police, I think it's just making the division bigger. It's making the division stronger. And if you have a situation where that the temperature continues to rise on both sides of the aisle, we may have a bigger clash at the next one, right? The next George Floyd situation may result in more death, or may result in an actual warlike conditions. And I want to make sure that does not happen. So I am grateful that they're going to have a lot of security there. And hopefully this thing goes smoothly, because there does need to be accountability. There does need to be due process, right? I'm a criminal defense attorney. Okay. So from Chauvin's perspective, he's innocent at this time. He's in custody, but he is innocent until he's proven guilty otherwise. And I expect his defense attorneys to put on a hell of a case. And I'm excited to follow along and see what they come up with. But, there are some pretty good arguments there as well, right? If George Floyd really did have a fentanyl limit, or a fentanyl in his bloodstream that is extremely high, I think the prosecutor's office is going to have a difficult time making the case that Chauvin's knee was the but-for cause of death. In other words, would Floyd have died anyways because of the levels of drugs in his body? And I haven't seen, we saw, I think a cover sheet, the first page document of George Floyd's autopsy report. But that's kind of it. There's a lot more out there, and it's all going to come to light soon. They're going to present all of this evidence in court. Hopefully we can be a part of it, but we're going to learn a lot from it. And I just want to make sure that we're trying to squeeze some value out of this. We're trying to learn more about how we can improve our justice system. We can learn more about how we can support the police, how we can eliminate some of the racial bias that's going on in there, how we can build a bridge with the underserved communities that exist in the country, just to sort of move the ball forward, make things better by analyzing where things went wrong so that we can fix some of the problems. That's really my only objective, right? I don't have a political stake in this particular case other than to say that I think that the police are very callous, and there's a culture there that they just sort of overlook a lot of this stuff. And this one was so egregious that this cannot be swept under the rug. So I'm glad that we're, as a society, talking through this. I made this point last year. The whole country was on board talking about criminal justice reform. Very excited about it. Everybody was saying, okay, look, finally, we've seen enough. We're sick of this. And we were all unified. I mean, 90% of the country was, after what we saw happen to George Floyd. Then suddenly, there was a reaction to the death, and they started burning buildings down, torching precincts, wanting to defund the police, and the pendulum swung the entire other way, which was a major missed opportunity, because I think finally we could have had a real serious discussion about this stuff, and I think we lost that because of the destruction and mayhem that resulted. And it's really unfortunate, and I'm hopeful that does not happen again when this trial takes place, because it's going to set the justice reform movement back 20 years. In my opinion. And we're finally at the cusp where we can maybe see some real changes in this place. Stuff that is not just, one-sided, stuff that's better for the officers, stuff that's better for the citizens of this country. And we can all move forward in a little bit more productive manner. I'm hopeful for that. We have Paula MK says, as a first responder, a paramedic, I can say that we are indoctrinated to automatically back other first responders like police officers. We are supposed to give officers the benefit of the doubt, even when something appears to be an egregious offense. Your channel has started to give me a new perspective on the criminal justice system, and I just wanted to thank you for that. Well, thank you, Paula MK, and I appreciate that. And we appreciate you for being a first responder, a paramedic. You're out there saving lives and helping society, so thank you for that. And, we've noticed this. Remember, I think we were talking about this in the Daniel Prude case. Daniel Prude was the other one out of Rochester. I could be mistaken. We covered a lot of these last year. But I think Daniel Prude, what happened, they actually basically murdered that guy on the side of the road. One officer was doing a plank on his neck, collapsed everything in his head. He died like 7 days later. And we were going through the body cam on that. And one of the first responders showed up after he was, incapacitated on the ground. There were like 6 or 7 guys laying on top of him. He was basically dying. And he was not a threat to anybody. He was in handcuffs. He was totally naked, had no weapons, firearms, not a threat at all. And the first responder shows up and says, and we played it like several times, shows up and the cop says, yeah, well, I don't know what happened. He's kind of dying there. And the first responder says, man, you guys have it really tough out there. You guys are just doing your best. You got to stay safe. I'm going, what are you even talking about? You just showed up. You don't even know what happened here. But that's your default answer. Maybe an appropriate question would be, well, what the hell happened to him? What did you guys do? Why is he laying there naked in handcuffs dying? You want to give me some explanation on that? Because I got to go save this guy's life. Instead, it was like, well, just kind of leave him there. Hey, good job, guys. Way to protect yourselves. And I'm thinking that's just very troubling. Jack Elias says, I wonder if Ellis is setting up the trial up to fail so it can lead to more social instability and rioting. I'll tell you this, folks. You don't want to read into or sort of mind read some of these other people and try to predict what they're doing. But we had a case here in Arizona where, if I had to guess, I would say that the prosecutors had no real desire to convict the former officer. The name is escaping me right now. I'm sort of embarrassed about it because it happened here. I forget the guy's name. It was a police shooting. There was a man in a hotel who was on his hands and knees crawling towards the officers. It was really Daniel something, really, really horrendous case. And the officer shot him with I think it was an AR-15, shot him. And on the side of his gun, it said, "You're effed," right? Sort of carved into the handle of the gun, or into the ejection area of the firearm. It said, "You're effed," right? It's spelled out, obviously. And the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, they prosecuted this officer. They fired him, and then they let him come back on, and so that he could resign, so he could collect his pension for the next 25 years or whatever it was. And they found, and the jury found him not guilty. And the prosecutors, in my opinion, it felt like to me like they just sort of threw the case, right? They just kind of said, well, we're going to go through the motions on this thing. But if it were not an officer, they would have been extremely aggressive, right? If this was some gangbanger who shot somebody else, they would bend over backwards. They would do everything humanly possible to make sure they got a conviction on that case. That same type of anger, that same type of sort of resolve, that energy when a cop is the defendant just doesn't exist. So going through the motions, well, Your Honor, we're kind of here, we're just kind of coloring within the lines. And it's just very formulaic, and then nothing happens to that cop, right? He gets a not guilty. So you could easily see something like that happening here. Now, this was in Arizona, a white cop on a white guy. And so I don't think it got the same amount of sort of national exposure or outrage as George Floyd would be. So to say that a prosecutor would throw that case would be, very, very presumptuous. But we'll see. And it may not be a great case. We just don't know yet. Are they going to be able to come back and show that there was another cause of George Floyd's death that wasn't Derek Chauvin's knee? We don't know. We got Nadarb says, I do remember seeing an interview of a woman who owns this club in Minnesota, said they worked together at her club doing security or something, but never heard much of it after that. Not sure on the accuracy of it, though. Yeah, I recall seeing some indication that they knew each other. Daniel Shaver, there it is. Yeah, Daniel, there it is. Daniel Shaver, that happened in your neck of the woods. Thank you for that, Nadarb. Yeah, awful case. I mean, one of the most senseless police shootings that I've seen recently, and it was just very gruesome. If you want to be sick to your stomach about what cops do to people and get away with, go look up the Daniel Shaver case. That cop is still free, and he's collecting a pension from the Mesa City Police Department. So, write to your Mesa people if you are in Mesa and you're disgusted with that case, as you should be. Thank you, Nadarb, for triggering my memory. We have Danny Girl says, watching your show has changed my perception in the police as well. I don't think they should be defunded, but some kind of reform needs to happen. I literally cried when that poor 9-year-old girl who was clearly had a dysfunctional family was mistreated by those officers. Yeah, Danny, it's kind of like, it's sort of like, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, like waking up out of the Matrix, as youth, as kids, even myself, right? When I went to law school, I wanted to be a prosecutor. I thought that the police could do no wrong, right? They're just men and women who are heroes. They want to save all of us. And I just was sort of indoctrinated with that every day. Police, they're great. They're heroes. Every day on the news, hey, police, right? Everything is good and favorable until you get into it. And then you just realize it's just like anything else. They're bad lawyers, bad doctors, bad teachers, bad repairmen, everything. There's a lot of bad cops, and they've got a lot of institutional protections that allow them to sort of operate under the radar, where in many other industries, I would be disbarred, a doctor would be delicensed, a repairman would be fired. I mean, the police just kind of escape some of the same punishment that many other people would ordinarily get. And the repercussions of some of their harm is just so catastrophic that it's hard to ignore. And I don't like to sort of come off as somebody who is anti-police. I do not think that all cops are bad, but there are some that are bad, and we have to deal with them. And so, when we have these discussions, I always kind of feel bad when I hear from people saying, you kind of woke me up a little bit on this stuff. It's like, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I know it stinks. I know this world is just not so good in some areas. You sort of went to bed at night thinking, hey, I can just call 911 and they're going to come and save me. Now, maybe that's not the best idea, for every situation. So sorry about that, Danny Girl, but I'm glad you are still here and with us. We've got another one from Jack Elias says, I suspect from what I have read about Chauvin that he is the kind of contrarian that if you told him something like, you are killing him, he would keep doing that. He would show those ignorant civvies. I really think that the death happened out of his reaction to the public's pressuring him. It's a good point. I think the resulting death was unintended, but the actions that led to it were response in the moment. If that is the case, what class of homicide would they be? And why? So good question, Jack Elia. I don't have the Minnesota statutes in front of me. We did go through them back, I think it was May something, when George Floyd was killed, and we went through them at length in prior videos. But it's a good question, right? I mean, a lot of cops respond that way, and I think that they're sort of trained to do that. If the public is encroaching on you, you got to go back them up, and there's good reason for that. right? You don't want a civilian coming in and interfering with a formal police investigation or formal procedures. But the problem here, I think, was that George Floyd was literally dying under his knee, and the knee restraint was totally outside of policy. So he's not protected by the ordinarily by qualified immunity or any of those other principles because he was acting outside of the scope of his formal procedures. When the trial goes forward, we'll pull up the statutes. I'll pull up the official charges. We'll go through them, and it'll be a detailed analysis. We're going to be talking about a lot of George Floyd. We're going to intersperse, of course, other topics. I don't want this to be a George Floyd channel, but we are going to talk about the highlights of the trial. So we're going to get into that when the time comes. We have One Drop says, after watching all the footage, he is going to be acquitted. He will walk because he followed his training. Show me where he broke protocol and he will go to jail. But it doesn't look that way, in my opinion. So there you go, right? That's an alternative interpretation. And to be honest, I haven't seen much indication about what his defense is going to look like. But if they can make an argument that he was acting within the purview of the official police procedures there in Minneapolis, that's a pretty good defense, right? I think we looked at the use of force policy from Minnesota, and I wasn't sure that a neck restraint, like a knee on the neck restraint, was in there. But there may have been something close, like a knee on the back or something like that. And so, if they can sort of connect the two, then maybe that'll be the claim. I think the stronger claim for a defense, from a defense perspective, is the drugs, that he had too much fentanyl in his system. And that was the cause of death, right? He was probably going to die anyways, is going to be their defense. And Derek Chauvin didn't ultimately cause it, will be their defense. Now, that if that happens, this country is not going to be happy about it. Ham-handed says the original coroner's report is called it a drug overdose, but with pressure from the governor and local officials, it was changed to unknown. Knee on the side of the neck will not kill you. So there's another one from Ham-handed. Yeah, and I think I saw that. Did the defense do their own autopsy? Were there multiple autopsies? It'd be interesting if there were competing reports. So, ham-handed, I think that you could probably die from a knee on the side of your neck, right? If it's cutting off your circulation, if you're blacking out, if you cannot breathe, if it's clamping down on your trachea and you cannot inhale, then I'm pretty sure I could kill somebody with a knee on the neck. I don't intend to ever do that, nor would I want to do that, but I could probably figure that out, right? So I think that you could probably make that link. But I don't know if that was the actual cause of death, right? Because if that was the cause of death, then it would be from asphyxiation. It would be from not being able to breathe. Because if you cut off the blood circulation, you'll just black out. If you do that for 9 minutes, maybe you have somebody without blood to the brain. Maybe they have like a stroke or something to that effect. We'll see. It's going to be a little bit of a battle of the experts. So the defense is going to bring their experts and say, no, it was a drug overdose. It was not asphyxiation. It wasn't anything to do with Chauvin's knee. On the other side, you're going to have the prosecutors, presumably, who are going to come in and say, no, he was but it's going to be about causation. This is going to be a causation trial. Who was responsible for the death? Was it George Floyd by ingesting drugs? Was it Derek Chauvin with the knee on the neck? Ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to. We'll see where that goes. We have the last one from Nadarb, says, Chauvinism, the irrational belief in the superiority or dominance of one's own group or people. Yeah, I think you're talking about the police. You might be talking about me, maybe. I don't know. I'm just gonna presume that you're talking about the police. So I think this is pretty normal. I see a lot of this from the police. You always see one of the most offensive things that they do, honestly, I would say outside, of course, killing people, is the promotion of the blue line American flag. I cannot stand that. And I see it a lot, actually. A lot of cops do this. They put the thin blue line flag on the back of their car, almost like that's more sacrosanct than the original flag. Almost like the thin blue line supersedes the American flag. And I'm thinking, no, that's not the way that works. Okay, we got a Constitution that says we got the 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment. We've got search and seizure protections. We've got right to counsel protections, right against self-incrimination protections, and on and on and on. All sorts of due process protections and all that stuff. That is symbolized in the American flag. For you to come in and put your thin blue line across it and make it a black flag with a blue line is offensive to me. But that's just me.